Today you join me in beautiful, well, usually beautiful Sonoma, California with Ryan. How's it going, man?
Wonderful. Thanks for being here.
So Ryan is one of the experts behind engineering and getting this CX-90 ready for production, right?
Absolutely.
Now, something that I'm very interested to talk to you about on this car is towing, because this plug-in hybrid version is capable of towing up to 3,500 pounds, but the full Inline-six, it can tow up to 5,000, which is pretty decent in this class.
Correct. Yeah, they're both pretty competitive in their classes. The plug-in hybrid is capped at 3,500 because we want to have a very consistent experience as customers are towing. Of course, with the plug-in hybrid, even though it has the same maximum torque output as the Inline-six, as battery charge depletes, of course, the power output does decrease a little bit. So we focused on making it a very consistent and confident towing experience for customers. So
Right.
at 3,500 pounds, where the PHEV is, it's a very consistent, very confident towing experience for the customers.
That's part of what I really wanted to dive into in this deep dive video about the powertrain and about this car, is why those numbers are different, because I think that's going to be, for some people, a big consideration of which model they might pick.
Sure.
Because the difference between 3,500 and 5,000 is a pretty big gap.
Absolutely.
Even though the torque figure on this plug-in hybrid at its peak is the same as it is on the Turbo S.
Right. Yeah, and again, it really just comes down to consistency. With the turbo, you always have that 500 newton meters, and it really doesn't matter what state of charge, what ambient temperature, what altitude. Well, of course, altitude makes some impact, but there's less variation there. Whereas, of course, with this powertrain, there's a little bit more variables to consider. So that's the biggest reason for that discrepancy.
And does any of that come down to cooling, or is it mostly just state of charge in the 17.8 kilowatt hour battery, making sure that you have enough energy to give you consistent power?
Of course, cooling is a major factor with towing. That's often what becomes the limiting factor.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of the two to get to that
Right.
final result.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and so for the rest of the car, we'll be doing a driving video on this car coming very soon. But what else can you tell me about the chassis of this car, about the way that it's been tuned in its final form here?
So chassis side, I'll let Dave Coleman, the vehicle dynamics expert, speak to that. But I will say that this vehicle drives very well for PHEV in sort of the enthusiastic driving ways, especially in sport mode. Sport mode keeps the engine on basically all the time. So you don't have that transition from EV to engine on. You always have the engine already on, and you have the instant control and response from the electric motor adding to the engine. So this car really comes alive in sport mode. It's very consistent, and it's really enjoyable to drive. You know, winding road. I wouldn't say racetrack because of the size
Right.
and the target
It's not a small
demographic.
vehicle, yeah.
But it is able to kind of fit into certain different driving scenarios very well. You've got EV mode for the city, normal mode for kind of city, slower highway, mid-highway, and then if you really want to get on it, sport mode is fantastic.
And then I know this car also has, obviously, an all-electric driving mode.
Correct.
And once you've depleted the battery down to around 20%, it will switch over to the gas motor so that you still have enough of that electric system, enough of the battery left over for you to continue to be able to get most of that peak power. So
Right.
what does this have to do in order to maintain that 20% once you've depleted what you might have filled up overnight by plugging it in?
Sure. At that point, it almost runs just like a conventional hybrid.
Right.
So you're still using the electric motor to try to improve efficiency, improve responsiveness. The engine is still going to turn off when it's able to, but it's going to optimize the battery output and input return to try to stay as close as possible to that, what we would consider the ideal minimum level in order to guarantee the consistency that we want for the customer.
Is there anything else, too, that you would emphasize about this car and its entire design, in its architecture, that we haven't stressed so far?
I mean, the whole car from the ground up was designed for the longitudinal layout, you know, front engine, rear wheel drive. The electric motor is sandwiched between the engine and the transmission. It's all very compact. It was designed so that we could allow, front SLA, double wishbone suspension, which really makes a big impact on the handling. And everything was designed so that the layout is pretty much as ideal as it can be. So the vehicle, it works well together. It's not a massive battery. It's not a massive engine. But the pairing of the two, the combination, is pretty ideal in terms of plenty of performance, very good efficiency, especially for a vehicle in this segment, this size. It's a really nice balance of all those things that you're trying to juggle that, there's going to be trade-offs somewhere, right? But we try to find the best balance of all those things.
Perfect. Well, thank you for your time. And now we'll do a little bit of talking as well to Jay from Mazda's team, who can tell us even more about this powertrain. Now, talking to Jay Chen. Jay, thanks for spending some time with us. I know it's not the most pleasant to be outside right now.
We're happy to have water.
Yeah, water is not so bad. But Jay is the expert here on the powertrain in this car. And there's a number of questions that I have for you, starting off with the way that the powertrains are positioned in this car, because it's kind of interesting that the base engine is the Inline-6 with a mild hybrid system. Then up from there, you go to the plug-in hybrid, and then the top of the line is also the Inline-6. So the plug-in hybrid sits between two different power output versions of the same engine, right?
Well, I would potentially argue that it's a little different from that. We have what we call the turbo trim, the Inline-6 with the turbo, 3.3 liters, and it's 280 horsepower on 87 AKI fuel. I think that's to appeal to our core Mazda customers that already understand the brand, already know what we're doing, and can like it. From there, it's almost like our MX-5 strategy, where you're kind of going two different directions, right? You have the Turbo S trim, 340 horsepower, 369 foot-pounds of torque, or 500 newton meters, nice round metric number. And then you have the PHEV version, which is similar power, but also the 500 newton meters of torque. I think people will ask, well, why do you make two powertrains with two different or almost the same output? But I think it's to appeal to two different customers.
So you wouldn't necessarily say that the Turbo S beats the plug-in hybrid, just that they're different options for different types of customers?
Right. The Turbo S, it's electrified. It's got a mild hybrid system, 48 volt, a roughly 17 horsepower motor. But that motor is there to help increase efficiency, smooth out shifts, get you off the line reasonably well. But the engine does the majority of the work.
Right.
The PHEV is 100 kilowatt, 136 horsepower motor, and that does the brunt of the work during normal driving. So if you're a car guy, you like to be able to stretch out the car, listen to the torque build, delayed satisfaction guy, and hear the straight six. I think that's the main point about this. Then, and have a lot of open roads, quite frankly. The Turbo S is really your type of car, right?
Yeah.
But if you want the PHEV and you want that near instant acceleration off the line, you're just going stoplight to stoplight in the city, doing the commutes, and the flexibility of just running on EV, my wife wants the PHEV.
Now, people are going to want to know with this car, what are the differences physically between the Turbo and the Turbo S powertrain? Because you're looking at 280 horsepower, 332 pound-feet of torque versus 340 horsepower, 369 pound-feet of torque. So a notable, 60 horsepower difference. So what are the differences between the powertrain on like what we see here, which is a top-of-the-line Turbo S, and the entry or the starting powertrain?
Mechanically, none. It's all software, it's boost, and it's fuel. I think that's the big difference. There are customers that are going to like the CX-90 and say, you know what, I want the power, I want to pay for the power, and I'm willing to pay for 91 AKI, premium fuel on every tank up. And those are different. But there are also the core Mazda customers that are very, hey, you know what, I don't need that much more. I'm happy with, non-premium fuel. I'll put it in, and 280 horsepower is plenty enough. And that comes in at a price point that kind of overlaps and lets CX-9 customers jump in and segue into the CX-90. So, go ahead.
If you don't put the premium 91 in this car, will it derate itself to that same 280 horsepower figure?
No, the Turbo S models, even on 87 AKI, pump gas will still make about 319.
Okay.
319 horsepower, but the torque figure is still the full 500 Newton meter pop.
Okay.
Right.
So you don't
as you
lose
know,
torque at any point.
yeah, the torque is mostly on the low end.
Yeah.
Octane and horsepower is on the high end of the RPM band. So there are subtle differences. But I think the main thing is that they have very different driving characteristics.
Right.
I think, for the traditional Mazda customer that likes the feel of our normal gas non-turbo engines, like the linearity, just that consistency of the NA feel, some of the powertrain engineers actually prefer the 280 horsepower version
Interesting.
compared to the 340, But that's just coming from a lot of track time and this and that. We like we like consistency of the NA. We don't want to have to wait for that turbo pump.
Now, something else too that I'm interested in, because I am as much of a fan of the inline-six engine configuration as anybody out there, but I feel like you really don't see them all that often anymore, and I would assume because packaging. So what led the decision to go with an inline-six versus a V6 or any other engine configuration?
I think that's a pretty good point. There's only a few exclusive members of the inline-six club in manufacturing cars nowadays. When we decided to make this big step to move to this rear drive platform, we had the option, okay, well, we can build another engine that we can potentially put in both longitudinal and transverse positions or that. But us being Mazda, we say, let's do it the way we like it.
Let's do it
and
right.
there's inherent advantages of the inline-six and challenges also. But if you could build the platform well enough, you could put the inline-six a little further back because you don't have the V-bank, you don't have two heads, you don't have two everything to package in. This kind of gives us that smooth power delivery, that sound, that exclusivity, but also, most importantly, manage the weight so that most of the powertrain sits behind this front axle.
Yeah, it's actually impressive if you look at cutouts. I mean, the front of the engine, is in front of the center point of the wheel, right? But it is.
It's barely in front. It's all the ancillaries. For example, if you guys want to pop the hood open, you can actually see that we went to such extent that we took the turbo manifold, integrated it into the head, and we routed the turbo exhaust forward. So your close coupled catalytic converter is actually mounted forward.
Yeah.
It's 6 cylinders.
Yeah. There you can see.
Modern day cars need that. But let me get this opened up for you.
Oh, look at that.
Okay. And so you can see the turbocharger on this side, right? But we did all the plumbing to have enough cooling, and then the close coupled cat is on the front side of the engine.
Yeah.
That opened up all that firewall space and suspension space here. And by integrating the head and some of the exhaust merging, that gives us a little more space so we don't have to deal with exhaust manifolds and this and that. And it still also integrates a lot of the SkyActiv technologies that, cooled EGR. Super high compression, 12 to 1 on a turbocharged car, running out 91 and potentially even 87 AKI gas. So we're proud of this engine. We really hope that this is the same tectonic shift that we had 10 years ago when we developed SkyActiv and the CX-5s, right? It came out and it did a huge amount for the brand. We hope that similarly, the large platform will be that huge move for us again.
Yeah, it's an impressive feat of packaging, and we're always excited to see an inline-six because they're such smooth engines. They're really phenomenal powertrains. So this is, like you said, part of a pretty exclusive club of vehicles these days, and it's good to see. Very soon we're going to have a driving video where we give a full review on what it's like not only to drive this inline-six, but also to drive the plug-in hybrid version. So stay tuned. Jake, thank you for braving the cold. I think both of us are shivering in our boots a little bit here, but it was worth it to get some more information on this new CX-90 and what powers it. That's all for this video. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and we'll see you all in the next.